We are in chapter 9, and this is section 1 and the last lesson for this section about early Japan. And so far, we covered about the physical features or geography of Japan, and we also talk about the religions as well as the early cultures. And most recently, in lesson 3, we learn about Prince Shotoku and the Yamato clan and how they united China and organized it through the influence of the Chinese culture and government or civilization in general. So, this lesson is a lot like a continuation of our previous lesson how the Chinese civilization influenced Japanese culture and government. So, this is a relatively short lesson, so have your textbooks ready or log into Loda USD website and launch Clever. And from there, Cengage Learning. And from Cengage Learning, log in your student account and password to access the National Geographic resource, Unit 4, Chapter 9, Japanese Civilization, Section 1, Early Japan, and Lesson 4. Pages 244 to 245. This chapter's essential question is how was Japanese civilization influenced by neighboring cultures? And the objective is to identify the ideas that the Japanese borrowed from China and adapted to fit their own culture. And just for clarification, although the title of this lesson is Influences from China and Korea, the focus is more on the influence of China. In fact, Korea is not even mentioned in this lesson. The Japanese visited China and brought back many ideas, adapting them to fit their own needs. So, just for additional background, the Japanese written language has three different character sets: hiragana, katakana, and kanji. These are mixed together, so kanji is borrowed from Chinese and is used with hiragana to form sentences, and katakana is used mostly for foreign words. So some characters represent syllables and some represent words. Because of this complications, Japanese is one of the most difficult languages to learn to write. Korea is in between Japan and China, and many elements of Chinese culture spread from Korea to Japan. And to learn directly about Chinese culture, Japan sent many embassies to China beginning in the early 600s. So, an embassy is a group of official representatives from one country who have been sent on a mission to another country. So, for example, today, the United States probably has embassy all over the world. So, between 607 to 839, Japan sent hundreds of people on more than 12 official missions to China. So, because of this, they brought back knowledge that influenced many aspects of Japanese life, and including architecture, art, government, religion, and technology. Because of this, China's influence expanded to such, every detail of their lives, the Japanese lives. So, including small things such as drinking tea, cooking, and gardening. These were all have an element of Chinese influence. So even the name the Japanese used to refer to their own country, Nippon, comes from Chinese language, which means land of the rising sun. Even today, Japan is called land of the rising sun and refers to Japan's location east of China toward the rising sun. So, China had a major impact on Japanese writing as well, which is very important. Even though Japanese and Chinese languages are completely unrelated, for example, most Chinese words are just one syllable, while Japanese words combine many syllables. So the differences made it extremely difficult to write Japanese using Chinese alphabet. So at first, the Japanese wrote in Chinese language, and then later Japanese added new characters to the Chinese alphabet, which made writing Japanese much easier. So not just the method of writing, the Chinese also influenced how the Japanese viewed writing. So initially, the Japanese considered writing to be just for practical reasons or purposes, useful for such as keeping records. Japanese aristocrats, for example, did not bother to learn how to write, so they are in some sense illiterate. And however, the interaction with China encouraged writing for cultural reasons. As a result, writing became so popular in Japan to the point that it became an art, and it is called calligraphy. In your book, you'll see a picture of students performing the art of calligraphy. So they are participating in an annual calligraphy contest in Tokyo. And finally, let's talk about other influences of China to Japanese civilization. So the Japanese did not simply imitate everything Chinese. So they just selected the things that they like and did not take any aspects of the Chinese civilization that they think will not fit or will not work for their favor, especially for the noble class. For example, the Japanese copied the Chinese civil service system, which established the hierarchy of ranking of government officials, which means in order for you to be part or to work for the government, especially if you want to work in a position, a higher position, you need to be qualified for that. So in China, government officials earn their positions by merit based on examinations and good work. However, members of Japan's aristocracy wanted to keep power for themselves, so this will not work for them if they will just accept people who are qualified to work for their government. So they did not take this part of the Chinese influence. So in Japan, the emperor appointed government officials based on hereditary and not on ability, meaning it depends on who you know in order for a person to work in a higher position. So that is something that they did not adapt from the Chinese system of government. Japan continued adopting and adapting Chinese practices into early 800s. So by then, Japan's own culture was flourishing. So after 839, Japan no longer sent any major missions to China. So nevertheless, China's influence on Japanese culture can still be seen today, as a lot of people around the world are confused with what is Chinese and what is Japanese, unless of course you are educated and you are paying attention to the details between these two major civilizations, Asian civilizations, influences in that eastern part of the globe. Okay, without any further ado, let's go to the review and assess questions. Number one, reading check. How does Japan's name reflect the influence of the Chinese? What is the name that the Japanese use to refer to themselves that is Chinese? Number two, make inferences. How does the Japanese system of writing demonstrate Japan's tendency to adopt and adapt ideas from China? And number three, compare and contrast. What was a major difference between the civil service systems of China and Japan? Go ahead, go to our Google Classroom and open the review and assess assignment. And from there, answer the questions. And it is the last slide, the last lesson. And don't forget to fill up all the basic information. And our key vocab is embassy. And of course, in order for you to get full credit, complete sentences, correct answers, obviously, and using your own words. So that is our last lesson, Chapter 9, Section 1.4, Influences from China and Korea. But mainly, it's really just about the influence of China.